Hello, my friends. This is William Lee back with another installment of our journey through Grand Duke Dmitri's diaries. And I'm trying very hard not to say all the time, which is a bad habit of mine. So if there are some pauses here and there, then I think at least that's better than the alternative. So that's just a word of, there I did it, just a word in advance of what's going on. Now yesterday we did the first 3 diary entries for 1906 when Dmitri was 14 years old. This might be a bit of a challenge because it's a beautiful summery day and there's bound to be noise. Right now, crows, my dogs, loud cars, that sort of thing. But never mind. We'll see what happens. So today we're going to do the 5th, 6th, and 7th. We have 2 long ones and a reminder of what was going on yesterday. Dmitri, in his diary entries on the 2nd and 3rd, had a bad headache. And on the 4th, it was better. And so we start today with a little update on that in his diary entry for January 5th, and then he dives right into other events. So I have completely recovered. There are rumors that tomorrow everyone is going to the big lake. I hope the weather will be good and not cold. Otherwise, they probably won't let me go because I would have to stand and walk without a hat. Maria seems to have a runny nose. There was a terrible incident on 4th January. Prokofiev came, and we had just started working when GM cut his hand severely while working with a plane. There was a lot of blood, and we had to send for a doctor who came quickly and bandaged the hand after sewing it up with 3 stitches. While that operation was taking place, I had to raise Prokofiev's morale with Madeira. He felt unwell and said it was because he didn't get much sleep at night and therefore had weak nerves. In the evening, I played Bezique with MN. So maybe you remember from last time, GM and MN. You'll be hearing those initials constantly because they were the husband and wife who took care of Dmitri, and to some extent also his sister, although she had her own governess. And so they were the responsible adults in the little household of these 2 children, Georgy Mikhailovich and Maria Nikolaevna Laming. Georgy Mikhailovich was a general, and he'd been a preceptor to another Grand Duke or Prince, maybe more than one, before Dmitri. But I'm digressing. So the big lake. So these diary entries are written from Tsarskaya Selo, which was kind of a posh suburb of St. Petersburg. And this, what he's talking about, everyone going to the big lake, was an annual event and is an annual event in the Orthodox world. I'm actually Greek Orthodox, and in the Greek Orthodox Church, we call this occasion Theophany. So the Western form of that would be Epiphany. And Theophany, I think, means basically revelation of God. And it's the blessing of the waters. So I believe it commemorates Christ's baptism in the Jordan River. I need to get my theology straight. I used to know all this stuff. And typically, it was done by the imperial family at the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. There was an ice hole in the Neva River, and a royal pavilion was erected on that or near that, and they would go down and they would celebrate the occasion there. But on this occasion, no, they were apparently doing it in St. Petersburg, and in Tsarskaya Selo, and we'll talk about that when we move on to the next diary entry, because there was a reason for why things were being done differently that year. So Dmitri was afraid he wouldn't be able to go because he'd been sick, and when you're in a religious procession and when you come to this hole in the river that's been designated as the Jordan or in a lake, you have to take your hat off. And so that was considered dangerous, that maybe he could get a cold or have a relapse of his illness that he'd just had. So that's theophany. Now, Prokofiev, as you can tell from this diary entry, was not a music teacher. He was not the famous composer. He was apparently teaching Dmitri woodworking. And this accident that Georgy Mikhailovich had, apparently it was more Prokofiev that was upset by it than Georgy Mikhailovich himself, because Dmitri had to give him Madeira. Maybe he was feeling faint, I don't know, but I appreciate this part of the diary because Dmitri is acting, like the good little host and like a young man and the head of his household, giving this poor fellow Madeira. And it's one of the things that you'll notice throughout the diaries about him, is that sometimes he's very much the precocious, adult-like little person, and other times he's very immature and acts more like an 8 or 9-year-old. So that's an interesting dichotomy. Of course, he and his sister were both almost exclusively around adults. They didn't spend too much time with other children, so I guess it's not surprising. So we move on to the diary entry for 6th January, which is which is theophany. So it was wonderful to go to the Jordan. Troops, the Hussar and Cuirassier regiments, lined the entire route from the palace to the spot where the blessing of the water took place. My head wasn't cold at all. In fact, I didn't even notice that I was outside without a hat. I walked beside Chakraban in the procession of the cross. Today is the 1-year anniversary of that unpleasant incident with the cannon when they fired real shot. Misha was there today with a platoon of Her Majesty's Cuirassier regiment. He was wonderful. Ioan and Gavril were there with the Nicholas Cavalry School. Tomorrow we'll have dinner at Pavlovsk. So he's jumping back and forth between topics here, sort of, because we have these new people mentioned, Chakraban and Ioan and Gavril and Misha, and in between that we have a reference to what happened during the Theophany celebration the year before. So let's start with the people that he mentions. So Chakraban was a prince, a Thai prince, whose name, I should have asked my sister-in-law, who's from Laos, how to pronounce it. Chakrabangsa Bhuvanath, I have. He was 22 years old at that time, and he was one of, I think, about 40 children of the king of Thailand, or as it was at that time, Siam. And so if you've ever read the book Anna and the King, I think it was called, I don't know, the memoirs of the woman who came, an English woman who came as a tutor to the royal children in Thailand, and a famous film was made of it, a musical called The King and I, and I think to this day it's still banned in Thailand because it's considered offensive with the sort of colonial imputations, although Thailand was never a colony. And if you watch that show, then one of the little children singing Getting to Know You with, who was, it wasn't Deborah Carr, I can't remember who the actress was. One of those would have been Little Prince Chakrabangsa Bhuvanath. But even though he was one of about 40 children, he was a favorite of his father and his mother, and he was sent early on abroad to Europe. So from Wikipedia, I have the prince was sent to the Russian Empire in his teens, where he studied at the Pages Corps and became an officer of His Majesty's Life Guards Hussars. So all the aristocratic elite families in Russia sent their sons to the Pages Corps, and the boys in the Pages Corps were involved in court functions, and they had a direct pipeline to the upper echelons of the court and the military in Russia. So Prince Chakrabanza, I think his parents were behaving quite intelligently. I don't know anything about Thai history except that they were never a colony, and by sending sons of the family to other countries where they were basically integrated into European royal families. I mean, you see here that Chakraban, as Dmitri calls him, was walking right next to a little Russian Grand Duke in the procession of the royal family. He was part of one of the regiments that was lining the street on the walk from the palace in Tsarskaya Selo to the lake, but he wasn't with his regiment. He was walking beside Dmitri. So the other people mentioned are Misha, who was Grand Duke Mikhail Alexandrovich, the Tsar's younger brother. Any of you who are Romanov aficionados know all about Misha, and that he died tragically like his older brother did after the revolution. So Misha was, how old was he? He was 27 at this time, and it seems like from this diary entry and from other diary entries that Dmitri at this time in his life really looked up to Misha, and he uses the word wonderful. So that changed in later years when Dmitri and Misha's wife were kind of uncomfortably close, but that comes much later. So the other two boys or men mentioned are the brothers of the young lady we met in the last installment when Dmitri talked about Tatiana, who seemed to have these fainting spells in church. This 15-year-old girl who was his cousin and the son of his great uncle, Grand Duke Konstantin Konstantinovich, and these were her two of her older brothers. She had other brothers as well. So Ioan Konstantinovich and Gavril Konstantinovich, they had the title Prince of the Blood. Each of them, Ioan was 19, Gavril was 18. Ioan was killed during the revolution along with Dmitri's aunt and half-brother. Excuse me. And Gavril survived the revolution, although he was imprisoned for a while. And he went on to be a friend of Dmitri's in their exile. Not, I wouldn't say a very close friend, but, a cousin, a relative, and they liked each other reasonably well. So at this time, they would have been two other teenage boys who were present. And Dmitri will mention them later in the diaries for this same year. Excuse me. Must be some pollen out here. So, in between all of this, we have reference to a very significant event, not as significant as an event that would quickly follow it. So this event occurred on Theophany, January 6, 1905, the previous year. As Dmitri said, it was the anniversary. And so during the royal procession, there would be, when they reached this hole in the river that was called the Jordan, there would be a salute, a military salute with cannon. And this year, whether it was an accident or not an accident, one of the cannon that fired was loaded with actual grape shot. And it pretty much, as I understand it, peppered the Jordan, came very close to hitting the people in the royal pavilion, and killed a policeman who was on the ice, and broke 4 windows in the Winter Palace, and sort of hit the Dowager Empress with glass. I don't know how serious that was, But there was speculation afterwards that, well, it might have been a deliberate attempt to assassinate the Tsar, but it doesn't seem like it actually was. For one thing, I think it was Grand Duke Nikolai Nikolaevich, another member of the family, who said if you're going to assassinate someone, you're not going to use grape shot from quite a long distance. But anyway, that may have been, and I can't confirm it absolutely, but that may have been why they decided in 1906 that they were going to do the Theophany celebration not at the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, but in Tsarskaya Selo. And just one more note about that, the ladies did not participate in the procession. As far as I know, they stayed inside the palace where they could observe everything, and this is why Dmitri doesn't mention his sister being part of the procession, whereas he himself was. And I can imagine how great that was for a 14-year-old boy to be making this grand procession on a street that was lined on both sides with guards, with the officers and men of guards regiments. That must have been really cool. So that is the 6th, and now we go on to just a very short entry from the 7th. Uncle Nicky went to Ropsha to hunt, but he'll probably be back at 5:30. I'm going to tea alone without Maria because she wants to get ready for the dinner at Pavlovsk. Then there's an interruption, and that evening he writes, "We just returned from the dinner at Pavlovsk. I can't write. I want to sleep." And typically he did write his diary entries right before he went to bed. So Maria, I guess, was being a typical 15-year-old girl. She wanted to get ready, whatever that involved, for this dinner at her cousin's house. Her great uncle, Konstantin, again, and Tatiana and Yohan and Gavril and the other children of the family. And Dmitri didn't need to get ready, so he went off and had tea with the Empress. And Uncle Nicky, Nicholas II, was off hunting in Ropsha, which was in the vicinity of St. Petersburg. I think he was a pretty avid hunter. And there were some of the Grand Dukes, one of them in particular, Grand Duke Nikolai Mikhailovich, who spent every minute he could hunting. And Dmitri liked hunting, and throughout the diaries you'll see that he goes hunting, but he was never really passionate about it to the extent that some of the other Grand Dukes were. He was more passionate about golf. But that comes, of course, much later. So tomorrow we'll move on to some other very long, relatively speaking, diary entries. So we'll see how many we get through. I shouldn't say tomorrow. I have been doing these every day, but next time, in the next episode. So thank you again for watching, and see you next time. Bye.